Well, Mother, it's time to talk about the mother of all wrestling television programs. Gather your little colliders around the fireside here, folks. We're going to have a fireside chat about Collision on August 19th from Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky. And I just wish that I had a way to convey to the people, the cult of Cornette out there, the size of Rupp Arena on the inside of this thing. The entire arena, it seats 23,000 for basketball. That's with no seats on the floor whatsoever. And I'm going to say that when they first opened it in 1978, it was built primarily for the University of Kentucky Wildcats to play basketball, because that and the inaugural Rolling Stones concert, I'm going to say, was the only thing that filled it up for years. It's a huge building, and Lexington, I don't know about today, but when we used to pay attention, 20, 30, 40 years ago, because we were either trying to run it, running it, or thinking about running it, Lexington's a city of a couple of 100,000 people, and it's got the college, right? So this is not like, it's a building as big as they have in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, whatever, for Lexington, Kentucky. And that's why I'd said a couple weeks ago when I heard they were running it, what the fuck? I know that Tony thinks he's over in college towns or whatever, but this is just, it's ridiculous. And as you could see, they did a good job of, dressing the place, but the entire upper deck was closed off and blocked off and darkened off or whatever. Because that up there, it's all bleachers. It's not even individual seats. They have bleachers up in this. They can seat 10,000 people in that upper deck alone. So what they did was they put a curtain down the middle of the building, and then they only opened up the floor and the lower bowl, and then they didn't put anybody on the side with the hard camera. And but they still, when you've got 4,000 people in a building that seats over 20,000, it somewhat hampers the atmosphere. I know, I know that they got the money to rent these buildings, but I'm confused as to why that they're not sticking to some place that they can, that arena down in Atlanta, out suburban Atlanta, the Gwinnett Arena or whatever, places like that are popping up now across the country that seat 6,000, 8,000, maybe 10. And you could get in there and not only spend less on rent, but also it would be a better atmosphere, would it not? Than these giant NBA buildings with a quarter or fifth of a house.
When Vince couldn't get people in the buildings, he went to smaller buildings for TV again, Mid-Hudson Civic Center, whatever it may be. And I think with AEW, the question has been why they're running so many big buildings and scaling everything down. And sometimes it kills like you said, if you have that many people in such a big building, it's not going to sound as good as if you had less people in a smaller building.
Yeah, it's the acoustics. It's the way the guys feel. It affects the way you feel when you're working. If you're in a smaller building that's full than a bigger building that's empty, even if there's the same amount of people, it's a different atmosphere. But nevertheless, perception is reality, says Vince McMahon. But the reality is that AEW is about to sell more tickets than any wrestling show in the history of the world in London, and can't sell pussy on a troop train in the United States because they're going back to towns they've already been to. And this is not historically a product that stands up to repeat business, because what's left to do once you've seen it? And now they've got the situation where people, if they buy a ticket to see Dynamite, they know they're not going to see certain top stars. And if they buy a ticket to Collision, they know they're not going to see certain other top stars. So they've limited themselves, and they put the tickets on sale way far ahead of announcing a card or even names. And then, apparently, from what we're hearing from the fans and what we've been able to deduce, a lot of times when they'll do these TV tapings, guys will do pre-tapes or be in packages and not appear in front of the people live when they thought those people that bought those tickets thought at least we'll get to see these people in person because it's their show. So all that contributes to too often familiarity breeds contempt, not being a Dynamite live event viewing experience to begin with, no pun intended on the Dynamite, because it was too geared for television, and then coming back too quick to the same place you've already been. Or in this case, they've never been to Lexington, and they shouldn't have tried the biggest arena in the state of Kentucky first. And I can't wait till they get to the Yum Center in November in Louisville and try to fill that 22,000 seat monstrosity up. Anywho, for Collision, we had the VTRs at the start of the words from the guys, Christian Cage, Darby, Bullet Club, Dalton Castle, and Samoa Joe, before we got Elton, and we got Kevin Kelly back. They let him out of Japan. Apparently, they reinstated his passport and told him to get the hell out. Can you imagine how insane I would go after 10 days if I was trapped in a foreign country and had to be there for a month?
No, I can't see it happening.
No, my God. Anyway, and they start the program off with a bang. Here comes Samoa Joe. He's entering the ring. He's the Ring of Honor World TV Champion. He's the king of television. He's facing the already in the ring Golden Vampire in a gold lame mask and bodysuit covered head to toe. And as soon as Joe gets to the ring, the Golden Vampire dives out of the ring and jumps on him and beats him up and shoves the referee down and throws Joe in, hits him with a knee, picks him up, gives him the GTS, boom, pops the mask, and it's Mussolini in gold lame. It was CM Punk all along. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, Samoa Joe.
Because who would hunt after the Golden Elite, the Golden Vampire?
That's right. And after he knocked him out and stood over him, he took the microphone. And as you'll recall, last week, Samoa Joe choked Punk out and said, "Fight me, bitch." Well, Punk said, "I accept, bitch." And he left. And now that woke the people up watching television. It was a great deal with a big reaction. Didn't take long. A hot way to start. We've seen the fucking unexpected surprise with star of the program. What else can happen tonight?
It's also good that they've established in the last few weeks that Samoa Joe's been wrestling squash matches.
Yes, because now it made sense, and other guys are doing it too, and the Golden Vampire didn't look any more ridiculous than some of these other job guys they've found, so it didn't stand out like you knew that was coming. And though, of course, they got a pretty good idea after he picked him up for the GTS before he popped the mask, but nevertheless. But that starts out, okay, I'm good with it. It's an old wrestling angle, as old as the hills. A good way to start. Unexpected. Boy, we're off on the right track. Remember a Collision a few weeks back when we said, boy, the show was going good, and then there was about 30 or 40 uninterrupted minutes of the Bullet Club Gold, and by the end of it, everybody had zoned out?
Yeah, I remember that vividly.
Did you feel like you got a flashback on Saturday night?
You know what? Watching this, maybe a little bit, but I also think maybe Juice Robinson felt that way too. It looked like he was trying to go for the mic a few times before Jay White was ready to give it up.
Juice is trying to save this whole thing.
And he's doing a good job. You
Yes.
can't take your eyes off him. You listen to him. He's great.
Here, the next match, the first legitimate match, was Jay White with the rest of the Bullet Club Gold, who is Juice and the Gun Boys, against Dalton Castle with the Boys. And Dalton Castle was really over in Ring of Honor, I guess, about 5 or 6 years ago. I didn't see a lot of it. Heard a lot about him. The Boys, the gimmick. Is it Adrian Street updated? Not really. There's elements, but it's flamboyant. It's over the top. If this was different in AEW, it might work because it was different in Ring of Honor at the time that it worked. But half the roster in this company looks like a fucking clown show. It looks like the goddamn Volkswagen pulled up outside Ringling Brothers' fucking summer training headquarters or winter quarters down in Florida, and a bunch of clowns jumped out. If half the roster is a parody of wrestling, especially on Wednesday nights, then Dalton Castle and the boys and the peacock feathers and the whole 9 yards just adds to the cartoon atmosphere rather than setting him apart from the rest of the group and making him an attention getter because he's so much more flamboyant than everyone else. To me, that's the assessment. In the right context, the gimmick works, but here everybody is fucking over the top. So how can there be a top to go over, is my question. What'd you think of his gimmick?
I've seen him before. I know he has talent. To me, the best part is the entrance. That's the part I get a kick out of the most. That's the part I enjoy the most. Wasn't crazy about his promo earlier in the show. That may have been the first promo I've heard him do ever. And I thought the match was okay.
Yeah. And I mean, he's a good wrestler, and he's had back problems. He's strong. He's got an amateur background. He can do deadlift throws. That's probably why he's got back problems. But the match was okay. And then finally, Jay White hit some kind of suplex over on top of his head, didn't cover him, pulled him up, his limp body and his arms so that he could hit his finish on him, and then beat him 1, 2, 3. So another modern, flat as fuck fucking finish. And when he hit his finish, it was sloppy. It was a long match. But then they go, I think they went to a break, and then they came back and did an in-ring promo with the Bullet Club Gold. And this again, same thing that happened last time. Jay White did a long promo, wandering around the ring, talking about Twinkle Toes, talking about all their various issues, while he was in the back of everybody, wandering around talking to the people in the arena, while the floor camera in the ring, the handheld, was on Tony Schiavone, who was supposed to be doing the interview, and the Gun Boys and Juice, and the Gun Boys are doing distracting shit to take away from the stuff that Jay White is saying when Jay White's not that interesting saying it to begin with. And at one point, one of the Guns was trying to stick Tony's finger up his own nose. And this went on. And I know somebody's going to point and say, well, the Midnight Express, Bobby and Dennis, or Bobby and Stan, when you were cutting the promos at the TBS studios with Tony, they were smiling or looking at the fans in the front row or rubbing their title belts or whatever. Well, they weren't trying to stick the announcer's finger up his fucking nose while I was talking, because that would have been distracting. And I was talking about shit that would get them over. So they didn't do that. And Tony was making funny faces, like he was suffering these children and he was grossed out by the idea of his finger going in his nose or whatever the fuck. I don't know. He's working along with them. They're all childish. Juice jumps in and you instantly want to listen to him. He's got the voice and he's got the face and the way he says things. You instantly wanted to listen to him, and he was very brief and then jumped back out of it. And then whether it's Jay White or whether it's the Gun, but the Guns are okay, and I like their work, and they've got tons of pep and enthusiasm. But this was, Jay White keeps trying to do the long promos, and he shouldn't. And it just, it didn't go anywhere particularly. And then suddenly, when we thought that was the end of it, out come the opponents, because now they're going to have another match with the 3 Bullet Club Gold members we didn't see wrestle against 3 guys that we hope we never fucking see again. And regret that we were witness to the first time. Your thoughts on the promo, anything before I go to the match?
It went long, and I thought maybe Jay White got lost, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just his style of wandering around the ring while he does the promo. Couldn't wait for Juice to talk. And like I said earlier, it looked like he couldn't wait either. He was trying to get that mic before they were ready to give it to him. They should have just given it to him. Because you know what the other thing is? The way he talks, the way he acts, he hasn't done too much of anything yet. Jay White, I've heard too much of now.
Yeah.
Juice Robinson, it's a little bit and he's out.
We've seen Jay wrestle enough now. We've seen or heard Jay talk enough now. We haven't seen Juice wrestle enough, and we haven't heard Juice talk enough. And I think he ought to be he shouldn't be the leader because he's Bluto Blutarski. He's a fucking weird fucking second banana guy, but he needs more focus on him because he's going to steal the fucking show when they do. But anyway, as the promo was over with, here's music, and here come, they used to be Bear Country, and we saw them recently, the Iron Savages, and what is their little jacked up short manager musclehead's name, J. Jonah Jameson?
I don't know. I don't know what was happening here, actually.
Okay, these two fat fucking bearded hairy fellows, the Bears, that are now the Iron Savages, have a manager that's a little muscle head on his own, but he's shorter. I think his name is J. Jonah Jameson or Jameson something or other.
John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith?
Well, his name is your name too. And they came out, and the short stooge was just screaming almost unintelligibly into the microphone. You could catch words where he was putting them over and introducing his group. That's not a bad thing, but it was so, he was not only screaming, he was gargling the words. They were trying so hard that he was almost ready to have an aneurysm. And I wrote, these are the most annoying, unsympathetic, obnoxious baby faces that have ever been on a wrestling program. And the fans did not give a shit about this match because they hated the baby faces. They were not only bad performers, they were obnoxious human beings. So we had a 6-man with the Guns and Juice against Meathead Stew here that even went through a break. And that's where I said the Gun Boys, they're trying, and Juice is working his ass off. They tried as hard as possible to make something out of this, but the opponents were sloppy. They were bigger heels. And I thought that the Guns and Juice gave them too much in the match that they weren't capable of carrying, especially that big guy that planted both of the guns and then slammed Juice on top of them. They're job guys. In case you ain't figured it out, they're there to get you guys over. You don't have to be that charitable with these guys that are the shits, that are too old, that ain't going to make it at this point anyway, and are there for cannon fodder for you to draw some fucking money. Be a little more prickish. You don't have to goddamn wipe them out in 30 seconds. But any of the 3 of these guys, or all of them, or any of them, throwing one of the top alleged heel groups around was a little much. And the people hated it. And finally, Juice beat one of them and took them 10 minutes. Talk about the match.
Well, this was the highlight for me. I have some audio here. This was one of the Iron Savages making a reference to, again, these are the baby faces, talking about the heel Gun Boys. Let's go to this.
You can call me ass boy, because I'm gonna...
Yes, he wanted to be called ass boy because he was going to motorboat the other guy's asses.
Those are my only other thoughts about the match. You have to see the visual because he really
Oh yeah, he's into it. I'm telling you, he's got sphincter on the brain there.
Even Nigel, I think it was like, what was that?
Yeah, Nigel was offended. Blah, blah. But that was fine. But then we had seen the Bullet Club Gold out there pretty much uninterrupted for what, 25, 30 minutes at that point?
Yeah, it was too long. And it was too long, and it was matches that I mean, maybe some people in the Dalton Castle, but at least with this other match, if you weren't already predisposed to knowing who Iron Savages are or whatever their gimmick is, you may not have seen this as entertaining as...
The Iron Savages' immediate families were not entertained by this. I don't care whether you know them or not. So anyway, then help me with what happened south of the border here. Because apparently Jose the assistant is sitting there on camera making a phone call, and he's talking to a guy in Spanish, and there's English subtitles. And was he talking to Rush? Or is he talking, who's he talking to?
Must be talking to Roosh, I would guess.
Well, one or the other of them, either Rush or Roosh, whichever. But then they go from the subtitles of the not interview, but just the video of Jose on the phone to on location in Mexico with a white guy who I believe, upon reflection, is that fucking Preston Vance character. Remember, he's rotten. And a lucha guy in a mask. I'm not sure which one. It wasn't Penthouse or Felix. I recognize their masks. They're in Mexico, and they're out partying and going to the tourist attractions. And this is on camera. And suddenly a van pulls up, and guys in black hoods get out and put hoods over the heads of the lucha guy and Preston Vance and kidnap them. And then the camera sees Jose still on the phone behind the van, and he taps it for them to pull off. And so apparently in AEW, we've had road rage, and we've also had aggravated kidnapping in a foreign country this week.
Well, to be fair, that's just every 5 minutes in Mexico right now. But at least everyone brings a camera crew to document everything.
So how did Jose go from the video of the phone call with the subtitles to the guys in Mexico obviously seeing a camera shooting them because they were only 8 or 10 feet away from it? And then they got, and Preston Vance, he's a big old boy, but he sure fights like a pussy because he just got kidnapped pretty much like that. Like, okay, don't hurt me. And then Jose's behind the whole thing. You know, it seemed kind of phony to me, like that couldn't really happen like that.
Why was it on Collision?
That's the problem. A lot of this stuff is not the stuff that we have grown to love from Punk. It's the stuff we've grown to expect from the other Punk, Tony Khan.
The other Punk.
So anyway, then Ricky Starks told Tony that they were wrong. He was not suspended for 1 month. He was suspended for 28 days. There's a big difference there, and he's going to bring chaos to the program tonight. And they did a nice little video on Starks, and he looks different, very stylish. And then he came out with Big Bill. And before we talk about Big Bill's match, the deal is Stark's got a manager's license. He's going to be at ringside. He's going to cause chaos. Did we see a Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash type of pairing with Big Bill and Starks? Is that Big Bill's spot in life?
Again, Big Bill has almost begged to be used better, at least in terms of how much he's improved.
Should he be Big Bill then, or Begging Bill?
Well, I was hoping actually, because this is a new thing, they would have changed his name coming out there. This would have been the perfect time to either add Big Bill Morrissey or something different. I will say he's in the best shape I've ever seen him in. I looked at the thickness of his arms. He's in great shape right now. He ain't bad in the ring. He seems to be taking it all very seriously. He's one of these guys we said we wish he was used better. Perhaps this is it. What do you think of Starks as the manager in that role?
Well, see, that's the thing. Usually when it's something like this, they'll just have the guy be a manager of this guy this week and that guy the next week and that guy the next week. But again, with Big Bill, besides the rotten name, they've just been using him with job guys against job guys, or with Cage, remember that match with Cage against FTR where
He was in
they
the
need
firm.
yeah, and in that horrible group, they need to put attention on Big Bill, but he can't be the star of the movie. He can be the supporting player. With Starks in the Shawn Michaels-like role, he's a little prick, he's mouthy, he's talented in the ring. But he's got the big fucking asshole that doesn't do much but beat people up behind him, Kevin Nash. Well, this could be Big Bill. I would explore this further if they're not going to already. Maybe they are. We don't know. But I like the pairing because it makes Big Bill look more legitimate to be with somebody legitimate. And it gives Starks some backup because he's still not the biggest dog in the yard. Speaking of big dogs, though, the opponent was Derek Neal. And I'm in favor of squash matches. I'm in favor of especially heels being able to go out and beat people up quickly and succinctly and get them over. But why can't they find some good-looking, halfway experienced athletes to do these jobs? That's what I was doing in Ring of Honor. That's what I did whenever I had the budget and or the contacts, was find the guys that look good, have gear, are serious. You know, instead of just whoever these fucking outlaw guys are that they're finding that look like shit.
I like shitty looking jobbers, but I'm from the Northeast.
Well, and
we had a lot of that.
They were back in the day. There was a bunch of them, and boy, on Atlanta TV too. And we could go on and on. But that's always been a picadillo of mine, and I've tried to avoid it when possible. And I would, when you can use a guy like previous generation, but a guy like Sean Casey in Cincinnati always had a good-looking gear, boots, clean, always had a tan, always worked out, could work. If you went to Cincinnati, you called him. If you went someplace else, you called this other guy. Adam Pearce, he and Chris Daniels, and those guys in Chicago, in that area 25 years ago. I'm not saying Adam was any better-looking man, but he looked like an athlete back then. Anyway. So they go to the Nick Wayne and Darby video, and at least on the Saturday. Oh, and by the way, I'm sorry, Starks. First of all, Starks, after Big Bill won, Starks whipped the guy with Steamboat's belt. So they're carrying that on. He's still got the belt. He's whipping people with it. They don't forget about things on Saturday night. They carry them over. They follow up on them, for good or bad.
Do you think that means Steamboat has to make a return? Not in a match necessarily, but just on the show?
Well, that's not necessarily what I'm talking about by following up. The thing is that he stole that belt from Steamboat, and he's starting to whip other people. Now he's going to whip job guys, but then sooner or later, if they keep it up, then he'll whip a top guy. And then that top guy's going to take that belt away from him and try to whip him with it. You've got an issue. But it's not being forgotten about. He stole Steamboat's belt, whipped Steamboat like a dog, never whips anybody else, never touches another belt. That's forgetting something. And with the Nick Wayne and the Darby video, they're following up on shit and keeping it alive. I'm not sure about Nick Wayne. I think he's relying all on the gymnastics and being a boy wonder instead of being a sympathetic teenager that can sell. Darby, as we will see later on in this program, Darby is tremendous at the underdog selling when he's in with a veteran that can lead the thing. But the position they're putting Nick Wayne in with this, it's all with the acrobats, and they've already had him slice his head disturbingly deeply on a fucking phony pre-tape in his barn where you could tell that it wasn't legitimate. I don't know. This may be a little quick and also the wrong. I know he's in with all of his friends from Seattle, but God damn it, there needs to be a veteran in this between Swerve Strickland, A.R. Fox, Darby Allin, and Nick Wayne. There's nobody to teach them what not to do, and that's probably what they need more than anything else right now.
Yeah, AEW's not known for their restraint.
Anyway, the 9 o'clock hour, and this does not bode well for the ratings, which we will have on the drive-thru because it's a weekend. The 9 p.m. hour was Willow Nightingale versus Diamante. And Chris Statlander and Mercedes got in a big fight, and Willow won the match. I don't know who will win the ratings war with that at the 9 o'clock hour. Did I miss anything?
No.
Good. Toni Storm in the back, dressed like Joan Crawford in 1936. I'm loving this. She is starting to become the Queen of England. The haughty accent, the clothes, the whole vintage look, the obnoxious, down upon you looking attitude. I'm liking the whole thing. We haven't seen her wrestle in a while, but I like the promos. And she's very egotistical.
She's been great in these promos. This week, her look was over the top. Good job, though. And I thought her interplay with Lexi Nair, who doesn't get any credit, but she's like the best interviewer they actually have there.
Yes, if they would dump Marvez permanently, Officer Barbrady, and get her, she's fine. She actually acts like a human being with a pulse.
Yeah, I mean, on the Dynamite preview later in the show, it was like MJF's talking with Renee. They actually show her in the graphic like she's a draw. Lexi Nair does a better job, and she doesn't need to be pointed at. Like, look who's here. She just does a really good job. So she's doing a Toni Storm interview, and it points out just that everyone doesn't need to be in a faction. And Toni Storm certainly shouldn't be in a faction.
She stood out more from doing this over the last few weeks than she did in the group.
She stood out more from doing this over the last few weeks than anything else she had done in AEW up to this point.
And I think off camera, the next time she wears that outfit, off camera, there should be a child's voice going, "Mommy, dearest." Then she turns around, "I told you no wire hangers."
Awful.
Then Powerhouse Hobbs wrestled a short dipshit covered in prison tattoos.
Who was over?
And he had to have been from fucking Lexington, and I guess he just got out of the goddamn county jail over there. I have no idea who the guy was. I've never seen him. But the local people there loved him. But he looked like drizzling shit. And the match was one tackle pancake, 1, 2, 3, obviously. And again, good to have squashes, bad that the job guys look like this. But then Hobbs goes to put Miro's camel clutch on the guy, the Redeemer, and then Miro pops up on the screen and cuts a promo. And I wrote here, I never know what the fuck he's talking about, but he sure sounds like he means it. And in this, he said he will, if I'm not mistaken, this is the quote, now he's finished with God. He's won that battle. And he's turning to Hobbs, and now, Hobbs, you want to redeem yourself? I will piss on your cold, dead body. So that's a pretty strong statement.
Is that gimmick infringement? Is that stealing your pissing on Russo's grave?
No, because I'm going to have the kindness and the compassion and at least the manners, if nothing else, to let him bury the piece of shit first. I'm not going to piss on his cold, dead body just laying out on a parking lot somewhere. I'm going to let him put him in the box, or let him put him in the box and say the words and bury him and put some dirt over the top and even plant some grass. And then I'm going to go piss on that and kill the grass.
Do you think Miro would be so over the top and willing to say these things if everyone wasn't getting away with everything else in AEW?
Well, I mean, I don't know it's necessarily bad. It's just I've still yet to, I wish somebody would sit down and say, okay, here's the key to Miro's promos. Maybe they could write it and put it in the program. Once upon a time, Miro and God were on good terms. But then God forsook Miro because he gave him a neck of sand. And then somehow his hot double-jointed wife convinced him to split up with God because God wasn't doing him any good. And then he has won the battle with God, but now he is godless and he's going to piss on Hobbs. It all sounds great, but what the fuck is actually going on over at the Miro household?
I don't know. It must be tough to date. I mean, he's lucky he's married. What kind of conversation can I have with him over dinner?
Well, and then, if he dates somebody that's religious and then he goes on the outs with God again, they may have to pick and choose. I don't know what's going on, but it sounds good when he says it. We'll find out what happens. I don't know if I'm looking forward to Miro against Hobbs, because isn't that kind of like the Road Warriors versus Warlord and Barbarian? It's kind of the match you didn't really want to see. You want to see the big, mean guy throw around a littler, nice guy, or vice versa, even.
It's one thing if you build to it. This doesn't seem like much of a build.
Well, at least QT wasn't there. Did you hear they put a belt on QT Marshall in Mexico?
I read about that, yeah.
So I imagine we'll see him show up with a title belt anytime now, even though it makes absolutely no sense in the context of AEW. He'll be thrilled he has a belt and want to show it. And one thing, Tony always wants all the kids to show their new toys. Speaking of new toys, we taught a new toy some old tricks in the main event. Darby Allin versus Christian Cage with Dino in the corner, Jim Ross in for the main event. I've said it before, Darby is always good with a veteran leading and calling the match. He's like some of the other guys where he's got a lot of talent. He just goes too far with these other jackoffs because they can. They can do it, so he thinks he should. But in this case, I think this was one of my favorite Darby Allin matches because he saved all the dives for the end, and there weren't that many of them to begin with. He sold and got sympathy and showed his fighting heart. And the match made sense, and he fought from underneath, and Christian was the heel in control that would cut him off, but then give him a hope spot, intermittently. And it was a long match for television. I mean, not as long as the 6-man main events they've had lately, but they had probably 20 minutes. But it didn't get old because you like the kid when what he's doing makes sense and you're not screaming, why the fuck are these idiots trying to cripple themselves? When it's a wrestling match, you can enjoy it. And Christian Cage, one thing about him, he's a master of leading a match with these guys and doing the littlest to get the most out of it. So I like that. And basically, Christian kept Darby's high-risk stuff to where you would remember the big things. They had a little fight on the floor, and then Darby set Christian in a chair, went to the top, and drop-kicked him off the top rope. Christian was in a chair, took a bump over backwards. Darby took a flat back bump to the floor from off the top rope, which was saved for later on in the match and also shows you who the smart one is and who the kid is. Because Christian took the pissy little bump that was safe, and Darby, on offense, almost killed himself. But then Darby went for the coffin drop. Christian rolled to the apron, so Darby went to do it on the apron, and Dino pulled Christian away, and Darby landed on the apron. And then the referee kicked Darby out of ringside, but that's when Christian hit Darby with the title belt and covered him. Darby got his leg on the ropes. And then Christian missed a charge to the buckle. And Darby put Christian on top and was going to do something, but Christian sunset flipped him off and hit a spear for a 2 count. But he got a big pop when Darby kicked out. And then Christian went for his finish, and Darby rolled him up 1, 2, 3. So, after all that time, Darby got the Hail Mary win by being more cunning and resourceful than this Bond villain that he was wrestling. And it was a good match, and Darby only had to threaten to kill himself once or twice in the course of the thing to get it over. And it was a good match. And Darby's got the special shit that he's smaller than the other guys, and he's more reckless, and he's more durable, apparently. And that's why all these other jackoffs ought to be told not to do his shit, because he can get over even better with it. But then Tony gets in the ring to interview Darby, and at All Out, it's going to be Darby against Dino for the TNT title. Now, that's not All In, that's All Out. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And as soon as that is said, here comes Christian and Dino back in, and they beat up Darby. And Christian covered him, and they made Tony Schiavone count the pin on Darby, which was kind of a way for me to end the program.
I didn't like that at all with Schiavone.
They're just using him as a stooge, and he's not believable as the person being put upon. You can tell that he's going along with it, and he's okay. But why do the announcers like that? It's not necessarily necessary. But having said that, It wasn't as bad and amateurish as Wednesday nights, but it was not an exciting episode of Saturday night's Collision that we have come to be accustomed to, past the shock at the start and the good main event. What'd you think?
I thought it was an underwhelming episode with a few good moments. I think they needed to do something about FTR. They needed to address it or say that they weren't going to address it.
Yeah.
But when they also announced that FTR would be heard from on the show, and then it's just in the midst of that video package about them and the Bucks, that's misleading. You had to hear something. Even if it was you saying you couldn't say anything. I think there had to be something here.
Yeah, and I remember now I remember skipping because it was a package about the Bucks, and I didn't want to see it, so I skipped that. But in the middle of that was 15 seconds of comments from them.
You didn't see them, you only heard their voices over the clips.
Well, in that case, I missed the whole goddamn thing then.
Well, that was Collision, the week before this big pay-per-view event.
Speaking of which, the weeks before these big pay-per-view events, because we haven't been driving this home, which we will here in a second, but Wembley Stadium All In is August 27th. Actually, is it the 26th over there and it'll be the 27th over here with the time difference, or what the fuck's going on? Or is it all the same day?
Sunday, August 27th.
It's all the same day. But then 1 week later will be All Out. Another pay-per-view from Chicago, right? That is their scheduled fall pay-per-view.
And that actually has been their big event because All Out was the one that but took over for the original All In when they wanted to do it every year.
But now they're going to be in and out in the space of a week.
In and out.
Yeah. And they may be fucked by being in and out because we're just now finding out what the Wembley Stadium matches are. But now they're having to announce stuff for Chicago the week after at the same time. It's going to be a little confusing, but more importantly, again, how much money do people have? And if they're going to pick and choose, one would think they would pick Wembley Stadium because of the happening. And at the same point, to be honest, if he knew when he did Wembley Stadium, they had to know they were going to broadcast this in some form or fashion. Why could Wembley Stadium not become All Out? Why could that not be the big fall pay-per-view, the big fall show? Did they not have a clue who was going to air what, when, how? Why? I don't understand. Was this the plan to have two pay-per-views within 7 days, including one of them being the biggest show in the history of wrestling?
There's not a lot of rhyme or reason to what's done in AEW, and then they hope for the best. As you said previously on the Drive-Thru, Tony's received a lot of gifts from his father, from the fans. The period of time where everyone overlooks everything is kind of gone, and it's easy to look at everything happening domestically or in Canada and go, oof. But then there's Wembley, and there's all these tickets that were sold before any matches were announced, and then the matches were announced, and now it seems like a lot of people, potentially people who spent all this money to go to Wembley, are somewhat disappointed, and you can understand why.
Well, you can't peak, especially with the shortage of talent that they have. I'm not talking about shortage of roster members. I'm talking about shortage of top talent that people actually care about, that people watch on purpose, go to see on purpose. You can't peak that many programs and angles to peak 2 weekends in a row for 2 separate shows with 2 different lineups. It's almost not possible.
What if go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say, and if they didn't know how Wembley was going to be telecast, I would have at least held off or, tried to postpone the idea of doing a big show the following week until I sorted that out, rather than just saying, well, we'll just do both of them. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
Unless you planned, and I'm not saying this would be a sound plan, unless you planned to have something really big happen at Wembley and then followed up on Wednesday on TV to lead into Chicago. I'm not saying that'd be the best idea, but if you did, again, It's not going to happen.
Well, but
if they did Bucks and CM Punk, if they did something at Wembley to lead in Chicago, that whole week, everyone in wrestling will be talking about that.
Remember, Vince did that 30 years ago. He switched the title, controversial deal involving The Undertaker this Tuesday in Texas. They did a Sunday, and then Tuesday, instead of the replay, they had a... See, back then, the pay-per-view would air on the Sunday, and then the replay would be available 2 days later on Tuesday. That's why not only did they redo the Beware of Dog pay-per-view where the power went out in South Carolina the following Tuesday with a brand new show, but they did the This Tuesday in Texas because instead of doing the replay, they did a whole brand new show. And you remember nobody bought the goddamn This Tuesday in Texas. It bombed.
Now, different fan base, different consumer, different way people consume, and different way people spend money.
Yeah, but more people were watching, more people were buying pay-per-view, more of everything was going on 30 years ago than it is now. It still didn't work.
Again, using this example, and it's extreme, if you did something to light up Bucks and Page against FTR and Punk,
go to Chicago.
Do you think that week would make it worth it? Could you do it?
Here's the thing.
You have 1 week then.
I'm sure Chicago will be sold out, but maybe the way things are going, maybe not. If they did that, Chicago would be turning them away. But that still may be, it's obviously not going to happen. But if they did it that quick, it might be throwing away pay-per-view revenue, where if they beat it to death on TV for the next 3 or 4 weeks, they may do significantly better on pay-per-view, streaming, whatever, because more people would find out about it instead of just the dedicated audience that's going to know everything. It might be quick to turn that around and do that on pay-per-view like that, but they throw away other opportunities. Why not throw away that one? But it's still not going to happen, because even though it would, as I said, turn people away in Chicago and get a ton of interest from the hardcore devoted fans, the Buckaroos and Hangnail would have to work with goddamn guys that beat them up that they're upset about or they're mad at. And they ain't going to do that just because it's business.
Well, why don't we look at this card, and again, maybe something will jump out to you as something that is apparent that would lead into the big pay-per-view a week later in Chicago.
Oh, boy. And by the way, just as we're previewing Wembley Stadium, and they're saying it's either going to be number 1 or number 2 at this point on all-time paid crowds, I'm not taking the piss out of it when I say this. Does anybody out there think that it's the product that sold these tickets, or is it the statement that the fans buying these tickets made? It's a happening. The UK fans are making it Woodstock. They've sold more tickets than Austin versus The Rock. Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock in the hottest period ever in wrestling. They've sold more tickets than that without announcing anybody to be on the card. Because it's not about who's on the card or what the card is. It's where the card is, the statement that the fans going to the card are making by going. We want a big event in the United Kingdom. Fuck you, Vince McMahon, you're the evil empire. Tony Khan is our friend, even if he does wank dogs. Whatever their goddamn thinking is over there, they were determined to make this a thing, a happening, and it's now self-fulfilling prophecy. And now, like you said, to be honest, to sell all those tickets without them knowing a card or a match, and now when they're finding out about it, all they've got to do now is bitch and complain. Well, they should have given us a better card. That's the only place to go is down, because it can't be as good as they had it in their minds when they thought AEW in Wembley Stadium will see Twinkle Toes wrestle Will Ostrich on a cloud 5 miles above the ring. See, it can't be as good as they dreamed it was going to be, because they're fucking insane. They're all insane, and they've gotten wrapped up in hysteria. And now they've sold 80,000 tickets, and there you go. I'm sure most people will like the show just fine. There probably will be some people complaining. We'll probably be amongst them. But they're never going to do it again. This is never going to happen again until the WWE announces WrestleMania at Wembley Stadium.
For 2 nights.
For 2 nights, and then they'll do it. But AEW, in the meantime, couldn't draw 15 cents in Chinese money in this country, and they're going to have to come back to reality a week later. So let's talk about the Wembley Stadium card.
And again, there may be more matches added. Who knows what's going to happen in the next week. But the first match listed for the 0-hour pre-show event, 5 p.m. in London, noon Eastern Time, for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Championship, the champions Aussie Open versus MJF and Adam Cole.
I think the only reason to have this is to further their issue. So they're either going to win the belts or turn on each other in that match, and I would imagine win the belts. Because that will be a red herring for what's going to happen later on that night, unless they've got some goddamn thing dreamed up with Roderick Strong and the Kingdom and whatever. But
Kyle
O'Reilly, maybe. Then again, they're breaking up that old gang of ours, breaking up MJF and Cole at this point. It may not be good for the ratings. I don't know. We'll see. Somebody's got a brilliant idea somewhere in there. We'll see if it comes across. But I predict they'll either win the belts or break up in that 0-hour match, and my money's on winning the belts.
It's even more intriguing than if they win the belts and then go into the match not knowing what's going to happen.
But then also, if they do break up, you can have a tournament to crown new Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, and that way Tony gets another tournament.
Well, Jim, another thing that Tony loves is the next match. In a stadium stampede, the Blackpool Combat Club and 3 mystery partners versus the Best Friends, Orange Cassidy, Eddie Kingston, and the Lucha Brothers.
Jesus H. Christ. Wait a minute, how many of those is there? The Lucha Brothers, Eddie Kingston?
6 on 6.
The Puddin' Gang. I thought it was 5 on 5 before. Now it's going to be 6 on 6?
6 on 6 with 3 mystery partners to be added.
Oh, boy. I'm sure they'll all be Japanese. So that way all those people will get a giggle. The BBC's going to win because they can't not win the big brawl in the arena. And I'm sure that they're going to, in the process of doing that against a bunch of fucking mid-card guys and outright job guys like the Puddin' Gang, they're going to do all the shit that the later matches that people paid to see could have done, but they'll do it first, so it'll diminish the main events.
Well, and again, let me just say, we don't know the order of matches. We're just going based on the order that they are here on their website.
You think the Puddin' Gang is going to main event Wembley Stadium? Tony's not even that fucking demented.
Well, speaking of dementia, the next match listed, Jim, Chris Jericho versus Will Ospreay.
Well, there you go. I predict, I don't know. They may want to make the people happy. Ostrich might win. Or they may want to make Jericho happy and Jericho will win. I'm up in the air on that one.
It's going to be a real test for Ostrich dealing with Jericho and the fact that Jericho always tries to do stuff that he physically can't anymore. Could be interesting.
I hope Ostrich is a member of AAA, the automobile club. He'll need it to call a wrecker to pull fucking Jericho up on a top rope after 10 minutes.
I don't know if they do things in England, AAA.
The American Automobile Club, not in England? Well, that's a travesty.
Well, I don't know if the next one will be a travesty, but Jim, for the Real World Championship, the Real World Champion CM Punk versus the Ring of Honor TV Champion Samoa Joe.
Looking forward to this one. I do not believe that the title will change hands because there's still the big unification to be done down the road. I think that Punk will edge this out, but I think it'll be a slobber knocker, as they say. I'm a big fan of Joe's also, and they've got history and they work well together.
In a big trios match, Kenny Omega, Hangman Adam Page, and Kota Ibushi versus Konosuke Takeshita, Jay White, and Juice Robinson.
Again, I wish we hadn't got jacked out of another match between FTR and Gin and Juice, which was nothing but a classic, two classics, just to feed the ego of Twinkle Toes and his little fucking friends and a douchey. A douchey's got to be there. But, you know, there's always next time. Gin and Juice are wasted. That's my comment in that match. Who gives two shits?
So is Takeshita.
And Takeshita. Or Take a Shit, as most people know him.
I don't know about most people, but Jim, most people may be looking forward to the next match. A coffin match. Darby Allin and Sting versus Swerve Strickland and AR Fox.
You know, again, Darby and Swerve and AR Fox are friends, and they're going to do all the combative gymnastics. And poor Sting, I hope they don't talk him into doing something else to show that he's still one of the fellow kids and he hurts himself. And Darby and Sting obviously will be going over.
Is this the entire card? I mean, there's a couple more matches here, but I'm looking. There aren't that many, I guess, names not on the card. Wow, this may be the whole show. For the AEW Women's World Championship, the champion Hikaru Shida versus Saraya versus Toni Storm versus Dr. Britt Baker.
I don't know, they've got two hometown girls in that one.
Well,
I'm
let
hoping-
me stop you, because we're getting a lot of criticism. You are specifically. Lately.
I am? What about what now?
Confusing England with Australia, at least with accents, or New Zealand with Australia.
Is Tony from Australia?
This is where it gets confusing. Someone sent me something that said she was like half British, half Australian, but grew up in New Zealand, or something was like, we can't win.
Well, God damn it, she's closer than Poughkeepsie. Point is, they may be tempted to give Saraya the win because that's her. Is she any more popular over there than she is over here now, which is about as popular as Crotch Rot?
I can't speak to the popularity of Crotch Rot in England right now.
No, I'm talking about Saraya.
Same thing.
Okay. Well, anyway, if she's popular over there, even if she's not, they may think she is. They may want her to win, but I'd put it on Toni Storm. She's actually standing out. She does never going to sell a fucking ticket. Goddamn one. Not one single one. Not even half a one. Not even one torn in half. And Dr. Britt's old news, she's been there. I'd put the thing on Toni Storm. She's different.
Put it on Toni, have her beat Saraya. That's the end of the Outcasts.
There you go. And they're mad and they don't want to speak to each other anymore about that.
Jim, for the AEW World Tag Team Championship, the champions FTR versus the Young Bucks.
Well, we talked about that earlier in the program. If this is a standalone clip, I will just reiterate my thought that I don't care what business dictates. I don't care what common sense dictates. I don't care what would make money for AEW or be the right thing to do. There is no way that the Buckaroos are going to lose this match in front of the biggest crowd of all time. They think their shit doesn't stink. They legitimately believe that they're this great tag team that has outperformed everybody in the history of tag team wrestling. They're convinced of that. And they're going to want to win this. And they're going to fly their families over and get them to fucking watch and cheer and take pictures and blow noisemakers when they win the rubber match from FTR and they establish themselves as the best tag team in front of the biggest crowd of all time, even though they're consistent ratings losers, they're consistent life losers. And now, with Cash in trouble, that may give them more ammunition to tell Tony, oh, we got to do it this way. But they were going to do it that way to begin with.
Maybe you shouldn't refer to ammunition when it comes to this.
Well, okay, I didn't mean to pun that either. But you know, these two smarmy, fucking self-obsessed little pricks are going to want to win this match. They're not going to want to do the right thing for business. FTR is a better tag team than the Young Bucks. Everybody knows it. Everybody's seen it now. Everybody's realized it. People are tuning out the Young Bucks on TV. Nobody buys tickets to see them. They're on the show because they were there because Tony was stupid enough to allow them to come in with the big boys. And now he's stuck with them, and he couldn't lose them because he already lost Cody and that made him look bad. And now they're going to say, oh, but Tony, we got to win on the big show. because they genuinely believe that they're somehow good. And they're not. They're woefully not. But that's what's going to happen in that match, mark my words.
Well, I think they've been exposed greatly in the last couple of years. And again, people dive out of the TV show when they're on, minus Kenny Omega. When Omega's there, people will stay. But it's the Bucks themselves that are the problem. Jim, finally, for the AEW World Championship, the champion MJF versus Adam Cole.
I don't know what the fuck they're going to do. I don't believe that Adam Cole will come out of this as the world champion. I don't see why that would be a thing that should be done. I think they've still got proven money with proven draws that can talk people into watching TV and talk people into the building if they eventually unify between MJF and Punk. The title Punk never lost versus the title that MJF holds now. And Adam Cole winning it would complicate that. I know a lot of people are friends, so you may want to do things with your friends more than you want to make money, but the money match is still Punk going back for the title that he never lost. And so something's going to happen, but I can't see the belt switching hands. Help me out. What do you think?
I genuinely don't know. It's either where we come out of this event, MJF's still champion, him and Adam Cole are still friends, or the exact opposite. Comes out of it and Adam Cole and him aren't. Either MJF suddenly turns on him, swerve, MJF's aligned with Roddy, something, or Adam fucks over MJF, teaching the longtime heel lesson while he's become a softer MJF and accepted by the fans. I just don't know if I could see Adam Cole leaving Wembley Stadium as the AEW World Champion. And I'm sure they want to produce a big moment. I mean, we're assuming this match will go on last because it's the World Championship match, but maybe that's not a fair assumption. They're going on first with the pre-show, these two. I really don't know what they're going to do.
I think the Buckaroos will put themselves on last also. They'll say, well, it's not fair for two guys to follow four guys because we do all the flips and Max doesn't flip. And that way they get to be the main event also.
Well, that's AEW All In London. Real quick, Jim, All Out in Chicago a week later. 2 matches have been announced. For the TNT Championship, Luchasaurus with Christian Cage versus Darby Allin, and Miro versus Powerhouse Hobbs.
Well, I'd love to see a rematch of Christian Cage against Darby Allin. I'm not interested in seeing the dinosaur wrestle ever. The perfect use of him is to stand there behind Christian and look like Odd Job behind Goldfinger in the Bond movie.
A prehistoric Big Bill.
Yes, if you put him in the ring and have him wrestle, it's going to fucking suck, and it's going to suck hard. And the other match was Hobbs and Miro, and we talked about that a minute ago. It's a natural thing. It's mark booking to see you want to watch the giant fight the giant. But sometimes those matches don't turn out. I'm not sure that Hobbs nor Miro, either one has the experience that can keep both guys as good as they need to be when they're throwing each other around. But we'll find out. It's not going to be Steamboat against Flair.
No, it's not going to be JYD versus Flair either, but that's All Out following All In, and this is an exciting couple weeks for AEW. We'll see what happens.